Well, hello and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from different people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practical Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to build relational capital and trust to engage in effective partnerships. I'm endlessly curious about what is happening in our world today, especially in our schools, and how we can share good news stories and strategies for what is working and how to improve the lives of children in our world today and in the future. In this series of the podcast, we are exploring successful leaders in education, so you can learn from a diverse range of people what makes a successful leader and how you can take their learnings and apply them to your leadership. Today, I'm introducing you to a senior leader of learning and teaching from St. Monica's Primary School in Wodonga, Victoria. Jack Neal is an innovative leader seeking to explore new ways to develop his staff to improve their teaching and learning strengths through instructional coaching. Jack and I will share in conversation about his passion for leading teachers in education, his experiences working in rural communities, and the improvements he's contributed to each school he's worked in. So I'd like you to welcome Jack to our conversation today. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's really interesting to learn from all different people in education about your leadership journey and where it all began. So perhaps we could start with where it began for you. Did you actually start as a teacher, or were you in a different profession before you went into teaching?
No, I've always been a teacher. I studied health science, but then changed my mind late in the piece and moved into teaching and did I don't know if they still do it, a graduate diploma in teaching. So It was like a 12-month intensive sort of thing. And then, I started teaching in 2008, 9, somewhere around there in a primary school. Very, very underprepared for what lay ahead. So I didn't actually think teaching was probably something I would stick to be honest, which is probably something a lot of people feel, I think, early career. So I did a little bit of teaching around here locally and in high schools and primary schools and in the state system mainly. And then I went overseas for a couple of years, I think, and came back, and I thought I was actually done with teaching, but an opportunity came to move into the Catholic system here in Wodonga. And I got back into the primary setting then. And I've been with that school since. And I suppose my growth and journey has mainly been centered around St. Monica's and the Catholic system. But from there, I've sort of progressed through into some leadership roles and ultimately into the one that I'm in now, which is leader of learning and teaching. So I've sort of had most of my growth and career, I suppose, within the one system and one school.
Yep. Why do you think you were underprepared for teaching?
Mainly because I didn't get to do any of it. The degree, I think we did maybe 3, maybe 4 placements of not long periods, I believe. And I think from memory, we did a lot of work around hypothetical sort of theory of what education should be about, but there was very little practical, technical knowledge of how to control the room, lead a class, how to use the curriculum, all of those things, all of the skills that you develop over time. So classroom management's the obvious one, but I think the actual art of teaching was not something that we really spent much time on in terms of instruction and what that can look like. And the other part is we just had no idea of how to construct learning experiences. Like they were more about, my undergrad was more about developing interesting experiences. And sometimes learning was a product of that and sometimes it wasn't. And, I think that just made it really frustrating early. You were hoping for learning, but you were sort of just lucky dipping, and some days it felt great and a lot more days it felt not so great. So I guess that's what led to sort of feeling underprepared.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's evolving now, but I think there's still a certain amount of that happens for new early career teachers as well.
So how did you learn that skill? Did you just have to sort of use trial and error, or were you
Mm.
mentored by other leaders in
Mhm.
terms of how to understand when a child actually has grasped a concept or has actually learned what you're trying to teach? How do you actually develop that skill?
Yeah. Well, how I learned it's probably different to how I think people should learn it. I think there was a lot of trial and error for me. I was lucky enough early to have one of the schools I worked with. I can't remember how it came about, but they had a special funding program, and that gave them a certain amount of instructional coaches, and I think there was two. And as the graduate, I think because others didn't want the coach, I got both coaches. So I had somebody um, coaching me every day for the first 6 months, roughly, of a school year, and that really sped up my learning because I was getting feedback. I was getting shown probably how to be reflective and how to critique your performance, if you like, on a high scale. And that's not for everyone, but I think that really opened up my eyes to the idea that what we think might be happening isn't always happening within a classroom, and probably got me wondering around how do you I think Peps McRae talks a lot about the blurry feedback you get between the teacher and the learning or the student, and trying to actually understand and get better information, clearer information about what has gone in and what is understood. And um, so I probably just started questioning that really early, but didn't really have any strategies. So for me, it came from a lot of trial and error, trying to, I guess, self-educate, but also work with a lot of other professionals that were doing similar things, that were asking that question and really keen to explore what is effective and what's going to work. And that probably, that really helps having that that team of people that are like-minded around you, for me. But I think for me, the real experience came when I was introduced to things more around explicit instruction and around the science of learning, and how we can um, maximize learning experiences and assure learning experiences just based on a more deliberate approach to what we're doing. And then from that point in my career, the response that I was getting from students started to change significantly, and I could see a clearer line of feedback around when I was being effective and when I wasn't being effective.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the real moment, that catalyst moment, if you like, for me to see that correlation around the type of practice that's required um, to I guess be efficient and effective with teaching. Which obviously early career, and for most of my teaching career, I wasn't that. So yeah, that was probably where the things turned from me. And yeah, I guess trial and error is one way, but now I'm very much confident that instructional coaching or instructional support would be a far more efficient way of getting there.
And is that why you started to feel a bit disillusioned with teaching in terms of the actual practice and, as you phrased it, the art of teaching?
Mm.
What does the art of teaching look like for you? It's a very unique craft to
Mm-hmm.
be able to understand how children learn and how to actually impart your knowledge and your and the curriculum with students.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it is on you as a teacher to be able to explore different options or different strategies? Is it
Mm.
up to you as a teacher, or is that the leadership role to be able to mentor teachers or is it a combination?
Mm. Well, there's probably two things jump to mind when I hear that. I think our system requires a lot of it falls on the teacher, and a lot of it is the individual teacher needs to find their way through that. And I think the unique element of that in our industry is because of that demand or expectation, or however you want to frame that. a lot of teachers are very personally invested in what they do, have a deep personal connection with how they go about the way that they teach their students. And obviously, when that's challenged or doesn't work, it results in personal, dissatisfaction or self doubt or disillusionment, unhappiness, all those frustrations, all those sorts of things. I think that as a whole is what our system is based around, emphasizing the teacher responsibility there. But I personally think that it's not only a school responsibility to have a better direction on that, it's a system. And when I say system, I mean not just a unique localized system. I think it's a national system, it's a state system. All of those things play a far bigger role than what they currently do, to set that up. I think we know enough. Like, research now is very clear on what is effective and what isn't effective, on systems that are working, that aren't working globally. There's no sort of wondering around that anymore. There's such consolidation in that, but we're still, as a nation, we're a long way around being consistent with those sort of that research and evidence. And I think our systems need to provide that for our teachers. I think when a teacher can walk into a school and have clarity on how they need to teach, what they need to teach, and when they need to teach it, that's when the art of teaching can really come to the floor, and they can use, ultimately, what great teachers will do, will take all that and then balance in their relationships, their understanding of their students, the data that's in front of them, and begin to craft that real art of connection and reinforcement of learning. But without that rigor around the classroom, I think the classroom teachers are sort of left out to dry a little bit, in my opinion, and it's left too much to chance. And some will make it and will do a great job. Others will fumble through and not do such a good job, but keep ploughing on. And others will find a lot of frustration in it and just say, you know what, I can't move through this. And we see that a lot at the moment. A lot of people moving away from education, because of I would say, an element of that. A lot of the times, you hear, oh, it's getting harder to manage classrooms, and it's harder to do all this, and it's harder to keep behavior down. It's harder to, and that's true. But I think that's a byproduct of our system not having enough clarity for teachers around, these are the things that are effective. These are the things you need to do, and these are the ways that you can do it. And it's going to give you a certain level of assurance. You'll get to a certain point. I suppose that's the part that really probably frustrates me in education at the moment. I think it should be easier for a teacher to succeed. And when teachers succeed, they feel joy in the performance of teaching. And then it becomes a occupation that we enjoy and we love being in that space. But if we don't get the success, much like the students, if they don't experience success, we don't really want to be there. It makes it harder to be there. So, I think that's a really big space for education at the moment, around trying to utilize the information and the quality of information that's there to make classrooms successful and to make teaching successful. It's growing, and I think in the next 5 years, that's going to be a space that's really hopefully going to open up in our systems, particularly in the system we're in. But yeah,
because there is so much research, isn't there? And when do you actually stop and actually implement the research rather than continuing to try and find answers? To issues that arise, but also actually pinpointing the issue in the first place is what you've actually addressed in terms of the instructional teaching and teachers actually having the resources to be able to put into practice. When there's so many different options, it really does take good leadership to be able to provide that strategic approach. Do you think your experience has put you in a good position to be able to put yourself in their shoes and provide that instructional leadership through coaching? And has that been successful so far for you?
I think it's always hard to assume what it's like for anyone in their shoes. Like I think we all have our own experiences, and it's hard to emulate. Everyone's struggle is a real struggle. But I think an awareness of some of those problems can really help as a leader to negate those same set, if you like. But I always think that the circumstance now for teachers coming into education is different than my experience 10 years ago and different from everyone else's. But I do think it gives you a sense of awareness of what needs to happen. I think like your point there about so much research is a really valid one. There is a lot of like I think we have organizations now that are becoming really, really important, like Aero in terms of their educational research that's non-biased, non-invested in anything. They just give you the facts of this is what happens. This is what happens within classrooms. They refine that information down to a something that's consumable, and they offer that as information to operate from. Again, probably it would be great to see that have more of an influence on the way that we act as a profession and as a system or as a nation even. But there's resources now that condense that volume of information, which is really, really exciting because it allows us to just sort of see through some of that. I think the other thing that's exciting in that sense is a lot of these theories now are not just like in terms of science of learning and those sorts of things. They're not just psychological studies now. They're getting studied within classrooms, and the effects are getting processed and published around what actually happens within classrooms. So people can validate those things, which is really exciting. So it's starting to condense that view of what do I need to concentrate on and allow for more emphasis, I think, on how we actually implement that within our classrooms. But I think the consistency piece, like we're never, no one's ever going to get it perfect. But I think as a school in particular, it's really important now to have a clear line of sight around how you're going about teaching, how you're going about delivering curriculum, and every process within the school needs to be really clearly articulated and support consistency for the student. And even if that's a little bit off, if the student experiences 6 to 7 years or whatever it might be based on your school of consistent approach, it's going to increase the opportunity for them to have the space to learn the content, if you like, or to master some of those skills. I think the biggest thing for me settles around consistency, and a school that can achieve that with close to the right sort of ingredients will have a really good impact, where schools that potentially have that flux of change too often or jump in and out of different programs or different initiatives or different leaders potentially, depending on the context of school you're in. I think that creates that lack of consistency, and that's when the students really suffer. So
Yeah.
I guess the best line of sight is, for me, is as a school, really embrace consistency and try and promote that as a way for the students to have a reliable path to move through the school. And if we can set that in stone, that gives us a lot of points to leverage from to help people move towards something. At least it's clear this is what it can look like to move within our context. And I like to believe that gives the teacher a sense of confidence as well, that I can see what I need to be or how I need to respond or what I need to do if I'm unsure. And there's cases where that challenges teachers too. But I think it's better to have that challenge and sort of discuss that and air that than have a lack of consistency, because that lack of consistency will really impact students.
Yeah, because it creates uncertainty then in amongst your teachers if they're having to learn something new every few years and implement from scratch. It makes it really challenging for them, and then that obviously impacts the students as well.
Yeah, 100%. And like we know about teaching is such a habit-based profession. Like you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of hours responding a certain way and doing a certain thing. And the amount of pressure you put on a teacher, if you're changing things consistently, it becomes near on impossible for them to implement that within their teaching, because they're probably going to default to what they've always done anyway. And then everyone's going to be frustrated that the things that were getting done are still getting done. But that's a byproduct of of too much change, and trying to not allow that level of consolidation for the teachers within a school. I guess the sort of flow on for that now, we're really experiencing. I know we are, and I assume it's pretty. It's right across the nation. Is new teachers coming into a school can experience that too, that overwhelm of so much to get their head around. And again, if there's a real clear line of sight, they've got a chance of moving towards something. But if the school's not really clear and not committed to their direction, what chance have they got? They're just going to be, taking in all sorts of different advice from all sorts of different people, and potentially getting even more disillusioned or frustrated at the profession than, or they get lucky and get it right, which is fantastic. But it comes back to that point of consistency and clarity for teachers to really feel comfortable in their class.
Yeah. And so how did you move from teaching into your leadership role now? What sort of drove you to want to take this position? And what do you see as, I guess, your main focus at the moment with your teaching staff?
Initially, leadership was just probably a tap on the shoulder, I suppose. I hadn't really thought about it or anything like that. It's just there's an opportunity to do something that's slightly different, and so you go, okay, sure. And I think that's pretty true in a lot of schools. A lot of times things come up, and there's either no one to do it, or people aren't so sure about doing it, and those sorts of things. So you get a nudge, and away you go. So that's probably how I started in leadership. But how I moved to this position, though, I think, like I mentioned before, around seeing the opportunities that exist within the science of learning and science of reading in particular, I got really motivated, inspired by the opportunities that presents our students, and I guess in a space that wasn't probably well promoted within our system, and probably not well promoted within our state even. I felt that there was an opportunity to have a scalable impact, increase the amount of impact that you can have. And that's motivated me to move towards leadership, is to, if we can find ways to make teaching more enjoyable and easy and clear for our teachers, and most importantly, make it achievable, efficient, effective for our students, then there's a real sense of, I don't know, the greater good, I guess, within that for me. So it really motivates that we can have a bigger impact on a lot of young people. And I see that within leadership. I see that within all schools. The privilege that comes with leading a school is the opportunity to have influence and impact on lots and lots of people, little people and big people. So that continues to motivate me. I think I'm equally as excited when I hear that students have mastered something or moved through their learning. Or just recently, we're looking at our year one data in particular was just through the roof, and how exciting that was for our students, but how exciting that was for our teachers and the teams that are leading those teachers. It's invigorating and motivating. So I suppose they're the things that bring me into leadership. I think the second part of your question is, what's the emphasis for our teachers at the moment? Is that right? Yeah. So at the moment, we've been working through over the last 3 to 4 years, establishing a explicit direct instruction model that is not just that, but is built around that. And at the moment, we're establishing a coaching program that allows every teacher in our school to have a designated coach, an instructional coach, and that coach is also a mentor and support for them individually. So it has time to support them with their planning, or just mentoring them around the challenges of the job. And to ground that, we've really put a lot of effort as a leadership team to establish what we refer to as a playbook around how we teach and what we need to see within our classroom. So our emphasis at the moment is establishing really powerful routines within our classrooms that are consistent across our school, working really, really hard on really minute, and when I say minute, I mean tiny goals for our teachers. We've spent a lot of time unpacking what it is to have effective professional development within a school, and the things that change the teacher's instruction for the better are obviously the most powerful. But to do that, they need to be sustainable over a period of time and be really small. I mean, there's a lot of research to show that that's the way that you improve teachers in a consistent way and in a sustainable way. So our emphasis is around establishing that program, and supporting our teachers to really get to that point where they feel like they're getting better as a teacher, and can take some pride and joy out of being better at the craft of teaching. And as a leader, that's our emphasis, but as a school, that's our emphasis as well. So it can, really help our students learn. We know that the most effective and powerful tool in a school is the teachers. So our whole approach for the last 12 months is to evolve our professional learning programs around helping teachers become the best version of themselves within a school.
Yep. And of course, when teachers are supported, they feel more confident in their role as educators. And I suppose in terms of your own support from leadership, what sort of support do you have in your role as well?
Yep. My role, I spend a lot of time with the coaches in particular. So I guess my direct work is with the people coaching all the teachers. There was 4, there's now 6. So we have a small team, and that's where a lot of my work is trying to help. I like to think I help develop their understanding of what we're trying to do, and provide avenues that we can do that really efficiently and effectively. So a lot of my direct work is with the coaches and the other leaders across the school. But there is an element of that spreads down with all of the teachers. I think as a leader, you need to connect with all the people within your school, and that's really, really important. And connect on positive and negative things, I think, is really important too. Like promoting that. I think as a leader, you always need to assume that what you're doing is being watched, and if you are promoting something that's positive, that's great. But if there's potential negatives that are associated with what you're doing, you need to be aware of that too. So it's just constantly trying to, I guess, embody the culture or the ethos of your school with every individual. And for us, that's a lot about welcoming, acceptance, trying to promote that it's okay to make mistakes and that things fall down and we can still fix them. But then being able to support those people to find a way to solve those problems if they're there as well. So a lot of the work is probably incidental in that sense with individuals, but you just try and be as present as you can in their space so that they can see that you have a clear line of sight of what is happening in their world. And whether that be spending time within classrooms or spending time with the teachers in their release time, or even just break times, I suppose there's an element of that that's really, really important to make sure that I think everyone within an organization, particularly in schools, need to feel that everyone's sort of in it together and that we're experiencing the ups and downs together. So there's a big part of that. But I think generally, our principle has always been very consistent with just trying to have an open door policy around everything. Don't say no to anything at any point. Just continue to bring people in and work with them where they're at. And with that comes a lot of challenges at times, but it's also really rewarding if it's when it works. So it's just being available for people as much as you can. But yeah, and then there's the obvious administration sides of that, of trying to establish the resources and the tools and the quality training that our teachers need to improve, which probably a lot of my recent work has been in that space around constructing materials and working to build the resources so that they're implementable for all people across the school. I think that stuff is the less rewarding part because you don't see the interaction with people, but a really necessary part of it as well.
Yeah. And do the coaches, are they internal as part of the school staff,
Yep.
or are they external?
No, they're internal.
Yeah.
All of our coaches hold a teaching fraction as well. So yeah, they're teaching 0.5 roughly, and coaching the other half of their week. So yeah, and I think it's really important that we do that as well. And I guess one of the things that underpins our instructional model is that the coaches have a level of expertise in instruction. So they need to be a good coach as well, but it's also fundamentally important that they're a high quality instructor.
Yep.
Because I suppose that it can just, in the model that we use, we obviously want to minimize ineffective process and practice. So if they've not got a clear line of sight on what that is, it can pull away from the program if they potentially promote a strategy or an approach or something that's not really effective and helpful, or not as effective as others. It can really diminish the amount of improvement the teacher gets for their time on task, and we don't want that experience. So yeah, all of our instructional coaches are very high quality teachers as well, which is a real privilege for us.
And have they been trained as coaches as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so that we've spent a bit of time working in the Step Lab environment and working with it's a UK based company that is just not long come into Australia. But it's about incremental instructional coaching. So there's a system around that provides a backbone, if you like, for all the documentation and all the recording and rehearsing of the skills that our teachers are working on. And that comes with some really high quality training as well. So we've worked through that, and then we've continued to, and we'll continue to work on how we diagnose learning challenges within classrooms as a collective coaching group, how we move our teachers towards our playbook and those sorts of things. So yeah, we continue to, it's something that we as a school invest in really heavily, is our professional learning. And yeah, with our coaches, we particularly do that around coaching, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds very individualized as well for each teacher. So you understand every person's needs and what professional learning they actually require.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the big change for us, is going from volume mass production PL that everyone can possibly take something from, but everyone can also find challenging at times as well, because it doesn't really hit the mark for anybody. And it's always because of that. I think one of the typical things you'd find in most PL was questioning time and people being unsure, and which is really valid. It really probably diminished the amount of time you could inject on exactly what the individual needed for their instructional practice. So yeah, we work really hard on that, and we think it's, from everybody who's worked in those coaching cycles, they're really positive experiences because of that, because it's not something that they either is beneath them in terms of they've been through that, they know how to do that, they've mastered that, and it's also not so far beyond them that they can't possibly see a way to move towards it. It's really in that space of, this is an issue that's blocking your effectiveness as a teacher. We can all see it. Here's some strategies. Let's undo that and move forward. And it really helps, yeah, establish that sense of achievement.
And how receptive are they to that sort of feedback? Are most people quite open to acknowledging that the areas that they need to improve?
I wouldn't say most. No, I think the natural inclination for people is to be quite worried about that. I think it's like I mentioned before, the personal nature in which we teach. It can be really confronting for people to observe that and critique that. So a big emphasis for our coaches is to do what we call a connect period in their coaching cycle. They're coaching them for 12 months, so they have the time to establish that connect element. And that's really where they establish those concerns and worries around, I don't like the idea of you saying that I'm not so good, or I don't like, I'm going to feel worried, I'm going to feel judged. And like we all sort of have a little giggle at it, but it's a genuine
Mm.
um, point of anxiety for a lot of people, and you'd be silly not to acknowledge that. And our coaches do embrace that, and I think you need to, for it to be effective, you need to embrace the vulnerability that sits there, and accept that there is going to be times that um, people will feel all sorts of emotions. But I think the more that you deliberately approach that and talk about it, have have a clear understanding of what that transaction is about, and how it's aimed at the professional aspect, not the personal, how it's directed at trying to find an avenue for you to improve. It's not about you not being good enough as you are. It's just all about we can always improve. The perfect teacher doesn't exist. So therefore everyone can grow. So um, when those sorts of things do get established over time, we've seen people move way instantly to a more positive place. But ultimately, as it grows and they spend more time in that space, it just becomes increasingly more trusted and valued. But I would suggest too, if they then went into a different coach, they might go backwards a little bit and be a little bit anxious as well. But yeah, so I think there's a level of hesitation, but most people, once they're in it, are really thankful for the experiences and really appreciate being supported in that space. So yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
And of course, coaching can be very transformational personally as well, because while it is about their professional lives,
Mm,
it is also a very personal experience.
mm,
And all of those sort of emotions and triggers do come up, especially
mm,
if you are being told you need to improve.
mm.
It sort of
Yeah.
takes you back, I suppose, a little bit to when you were at school
Mm-hmm.
and being told, you need to improve your learning. So
Mm.
it can be, I'll just clear my throat.
Yeah.
It can be a process where it can become quite personal, but the skills of the coach come into play where they're able to bring it back to the profession and make sure that those triggers are not something that impacts their professional work.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And a big emphasis in that is the language that's used within that coaching experience too. Um, and we've all been in models. I've done a lot of coaching where it's based on question and think and I wonder and potential and all of those sorts of things. We really try and move away from that and just deal with what we see and the actual elements that are there. So a conversation of I feel like potentially Rachel wasn't engaged is not something that ever comes up in any of our conversations. I noticed Rachel look out the window 4 times would be something that you might make reference to. And the difference, it sounds very minuscule, but the difference between just speaking in what we actually see and the impact that that might be having on the learning, well, that is, not might, it has a significant shift in the I guess the reception of that discussion. We really hope to be able to get most people to record elements of their observation as well. And we've found when we've done that, those conversations like, see here, this happened 4 or 5 times, this happened, you only stood at this part of the room, you never went over here, are things that you can then share and you have that clear understanding. Because I think the real personal challenges come when the interpretation of what a coach might be saying to the coachee isn't received equally by the coachee as it's intended by the coach or vice versa. And then you've got that chasm of not being on the same plane. A lot of our program is negated when we can actually just speak in the fact. This is what we've seen. This is where that happened. This is when it happened. This is how many times that happened. So when those sorts of things are ironed out, and that takes a lot of training to get away from that type of approach and move towards a little bit more rigor, I guess, around it. But we've really found that people can just see those things and go, okay, what can I do about that if that's happening? And that, yes, we agree that that's having an impact. We call it developing insight, understanding why that's a problem. Um, Teachers are just really happy to embrace any support to be able to get rid of it because it's like, okay, I can really see that's getting in the way. So give me some information. Like, and as it evolves, people just become more like, all right, I back your judgment on this. I can see it. I don't show me all the video or don't tell me the stats. Just what are we doing today? But that comes from establishing that real clear and trust in that
Yeah.
what you're noticing is literally just what you're noticing. It's not an opinion. It's not a wondering or a thought. It's these things are happening and these things are problematic. So let's work on those elements. So yeah, I think it's just in the approach. The coach needs to be really clear that keeping it real, honest, and really evidence based in terms of what you can see is fundamentally important in that space.
It sounds a lot about creating self-awareness as well in terms of movement around the classroom and engaging with students and um, in I suppose, the rush of every day of every class of
Mm.
moving through the curriculum and then moving on to the next class and all of those sorts of challenges that teachers have every day, and just having that awareness of themselves in
Mm-hmm.
every moment.
Yep.
Do you think that that is a skill that should be taught earlier in their teaching career? Because not every school would have the same sort of coaching support as
Mm.
yours does,
Mm.
for example. And I think it's a fantastic model because just having that one-to-one support is gold, really, because it's
Mm.
probably a luxury.
Yeah.
But yeah, really just helping teachers have that self-awareness of who they are actually presenting as in the classroom.
Yeah. No, I do think it's really important. The challenge with that though is to be self-aware at that level. You really need a real strong understanding of what it is you're teaching and a real strong understanding of how you're going to teach it. And as you're coming out of pre-service teachers, they just don't have that yet. So I guess the one way is offering, recording and being able to see themselves in action and see what they're doing. Because in the moment, and again, that goes back to that really blurry feedback that we get from students. We might be thinking one thing, trying to make 15 different decisions while we're watching six kids have a little argument and two kids do something else and one kid's really finish their work. There's so much going on. It's really hard to be that self-aware. So
Mm.
I think it would be great if people were, but I think that's where our industry can really improve around creating, again, going back to those systems that can provide that this is the content, this is what it needs to be, this is how it should be done. Here's a model of it being done well. You can compare yourself to that model. You can then see a clearer line of how close am I to that? How much am I have I got to grow? And we try and build on that a little bit with our coaches in particular and staff around. We just look at four main phases of our awareness. Is, are we controlling attention? Do we have everyone in the room's attention? And if we don't have full attention from everybody, well, then whatever we teach is not really relevant because it's not going to be consumed by everybody. So we start there, and then once we actually have everyone's attention, are we managing the working memory of those kids in a way that allows them to access this in the way that we've intended? So has the planning gone to plan? Is it too much, not enough? Is it challenging? All those sort of things. Once we've got that in place, we sort of start to look at how are we getting them to use this information? Do they do something meaningful with it? Do they take it somewhere? Do we check that they've got it? Have we got check for understanding or closure points that show us that they've actually learnt that content? And then the last piece is, does this fit with something else? When are we going to bring this back? Where is our program allowing us to, get them to retrieve on this and all of the other bits that reduce the forgetting curve for those students? So those four spaces of awareness are the big ones, which our teachers usually come out with very little awareness of any of those concepts, particularly around cognitive load and working memory for kids, but also around how to construct learning or memories. So if their awareness of their self is not directed in that way, it's not into the actual framework of instruction in positive learning. It might be more in an awareness of how they're feeling or how the kids are smiling or something like that. It can be misleading to how effective their teaching is. So I think there's degrees of that self-awareness piece. Is it self-awareness to a certain standard or criteria that's going to help them with their instruction and their teaching? Great. But if it's self-awareness just in maybe unproductive places, potentially not so positive. But I do think it's a really hard ask for someone to come straight out of uni as it currently is and be really aware, because there's so much to get their head around in a classroom.
Yeah.
And potentially we feel that a coach is a real great way of negating that. And we have quite a few graduates next year that we're looking forward to supporting through their first year of teaching. And hopefully, yeah, we can turn the tables a little bit for those guys, but
Yeah.
not totally, because it's a crazy 12 months, isn't it?
So, how much flexibility is there with explicit teaching and consistency, I suppose, across systems and across schools? How much flexibility is there for creativity in teaching?
Yeah, I think there's plenty. There's a lot of criticism around explicit in teaching that stifles that. It's what do they call it, drill and kill and all that sort of stuff. And there's elements to it that look a lot like that. We do a lot of chanting in our instruction. We do a lot of routine-based practice. We do a lot of repetition. But when you unpack why we do that, it is absolute fact that to learn something, you need repetition. To be able to master something, you need even more repetition. So if you don't have repetition, you're not learning anything. And if
For
you
the
don't
neural
repeat that,
connections to take place.
exactly. Yep. You've got to let that happen.
Mm.
But then the real exciting part is once you establish that, what do you do with it? And that's where you begin to get to the point where students are mastering skills instead of just learning a skill. And when they've mastered a skill, they can then apply it in a variety of different ways, and giving them the opportunity to build into that application is the ultimate of what we're doing. But I feel there's a genuine misconception by people that if you allow student autonomy and choice really early, it gives them that invigoration and the motivation to explore and to take their learning further. We know that that's not powerful for all learners. Some people are naturally really fast and will move into that space quite well and effectively. But there's a whole heap of people that won't even make one step towards that. It might be superficial or it might be non-existent. And that's not good enough in education. We have to educate everyone in the room. So I think the challenge is being able to accept that there's certain things that will work for everybody. And let's give that ingredient. Let's make sure that everybody gets those skills, gets that repetition, gets that level of understanding so they can get to that point of creativity. And then just like the students, the teachers can do the same. You can increase your personality within that. You can decrease your personality within that if you want. If it wants to be creative in terms of it, depends on your definition of creativity. If you want to incorporate more artistic ways of doing certain things, then sure, do that. But the fundamentals need to be there and the foundation needs to be there to allow that to be successful for everybody. And the criticism, I often hear that actually, even people within our staff criticize about too much skill and drill, too much that type of argument. I think it's really important that people understand the fundamentals that go into developing learning, a long-term memory. We need something in long-term memory to have learnt it. And once we've done that, the possibilities are huge. And we're seeing, I use an example of some of our kids that have been probably in between our pedagogical approaches. They sort of started in more, we had a real heavy play base and open-ended inquiry style learning. And then as they've moved through, we've slowly sort of moved from that to a more explicit model. In particular with their writing, they've just started to learn how to construct paragraphs through an explicit model, so through the writing revolution model. And they started out really hesitant, really tentative with their learning, and they were not really writing a lot, and they were not really creative with their writing, and it wasn't really yeah, it wasn't worth reading a lot of it. But now, after just this year and the last 6 months, they've had repetition around that structure and that process of constructing that writing. And they've been able to build fundamental skills on top of that as well. And you look at their writing at the end, they did a writing piece around their reflection of their year. And the way that they constructed it was just fantastic. But the quality of the writing and the different flavor that was in every single student's paragraph really spoke to their individual sort of mindset around that. It gave them the opportunity to use a collective skill set that the teacher could influence and provide them to be able to articulate their thinking and show their individuality within the context of school. They wouldn't have got there if we didn't do it that way. They weren't able to. We hadn't seen it, but that those teachers were able to embrace that opportunity. And I think, yeah, that's what excites me. Great teachers are the ones that get it and can deliver that, and then embrace their, if you like the word, individualism or creativity, to be able to
Imagination.
imagination, to take that to places that, you know, are exciting for them as well, because, you know, there's an element of keeping the teacher engaged and interested as well in that. But yeah, so I do think it's there. But I also acknowledge that learning is challenging. Like, it is a challenging experience. We are not innately designed to find learning easy. It is a biological challenge, and the quality of the learning will often be more challenging for some kids, I suppose. Just the nature of different brains and different people and different environments and all of those sorts of things. So that struggle, I think, as a system, education, we have to embrace that struggle and then overcome that struggle and then utilize those experiences once we get there. And when we can do that, that's the exciting stuff for me. That's
Yeah.
where it'll happen.
And it really is a combination of explicit instruction and all other elements of learning. And like you mentioned before, the science of learning. I'm very interested to understand how to support children's cognitive and non-cognitive skills in the home. So parents having the capacity, and they do have the capacity, to be able to provide those opportunities for play and learning through experimentation and all of those types of learning skills that I suppose as a child, you know, in my era, we were always outside creating things and using our imaginations and learning through experience, to then have the, I suppose, the skill to be able to tap into our imagination and explore that creative side. But also, well, I suppose in my mind, that's what the teaching, the explicit teaching side of it is, to show you how to structure that in a way that is, you know, able to be read and comprehended and makes sense and explores all different concepts. Do you think that a lot of children now are missing out on those skills? Maybe perhaps not so much in the rural and regional areas where they do get a chance to be outdoors a lot more and have those opportunities. But do you feel that there's a place for parents to be able to step in a lot of ways to explore those learning opportunities at home to strengthen their cognitive skills so that they're able to grasp concepts more easily in school, or to be able to express themselves through their imagination using the explicit instruction at school?
Yeah, there's a few things that triggers for me. Yes, there's a lot more parents can do, and regional is just the same as everywhere else. I think you look at the information around school readiness. We have an OT that comes into our school periodically, and a lot of her work, she refers to the school readiness from, say, roughly mid-80s to mid-90s, where 95% of kids were coming with, you know, the fine and gross motor skills at a certain level and a social competency of a certain level that only about 5 or 6% of kids are coming to school with now. They're not getting that opportunity. They're not pulling things enough, climbing things enough, playing on things enough, jumping through things enough. You see a lot of infant-based behaviors still in kids that come into school, just that infant reflex when they turn their head, they turn their hands, and all of those elements that are evolved out of us biologically through things like crawling and playing and all of those sort of things. So there's definitely a huge cultural um, piece to that, and that families can play a huge role in that. I think the busyness of the family life now, with both parents working in nearly every family, or everybody working in the family, makes a significant impact on that, and increases the amount of childcare, and increases some things and decreases others. And there's a whole heap of things there that I think, in terms of cognitive preparation, that helps. Also, emotional regulation, emotional coaching, and being able to understand what no is, for a simpler term, and being able to process disappointment and handle those sort of emotions is something that a lot of kids don't come to school with a real strong understanding of, because they, the nature of probably family life has probably changed a little bit, and they don't have those experiences, and they do play a significant role in their ability to start learning in an academic sense, if you like, because of where they sit. So yes, I think, and that continues to grow with them, like the need for the role of the parent to connect with students, and students with their kids, to be able to support them in all of those areas, is really fundamentally important, and is never something that is going to change. The other thing around the explicit instruction, there's a couple of things in terms of creativity, probably a misconception. There's a lot of evidence around the positive impact of explicit instruction on what they call soft skills, like creativity, imagination, and those sorts of things. To be able to be truly creative with something, you need to know it first. So being able to introduce kids to things that are new, for example, they mightn't know what paint is. And if we just say just paint, they'll create something that's individual, yes. But if we want them to learn how to paint, then we should show them techniques and things on how to paint. And when they know how to paint, they can then do it in a way that allows them to be creative. So the challenge again comes back to understanding what parts are going to benefit the student if it's explicitly presented to them. There's probably two things I think around that, around biologically primary and biologically secondary. So things that are primary for us are things that we need to experience through play and interaction. So socialization and interaction with other humans, that is really beneficial by doing it.
Yeah.
We need to be in it and experience other people in a variety of different ways, and learn, because that's primary for us. We're designed to evolve that way. That's things like walking and talking and all of those things. Biologically secondary are things that are really beneficial if we can be explicitly shown them, because they're things that require, maybe it's a declarative piece of knowledge. It's something like 2 times 2 is 4. That always has been, always will be. So just tell me. Don't let me guess. Don't let me explore it. Don't let me play with it, because it is what it is. And that's really important for that to be explicitly taught and shown. And procedural based things, procedural memory, this A to B to C to D is what happens, and we get this result. Those things are really beneficial to be explicitly taught, because they're secondary. And when we've got them, we can use them to do other things. So I think the blanket rule that we explicitly teach everything is not true, but you need to know what you're trying to teach. And if it's beneficial for the student to have something that is explicitly given to them before they endeavor to do a different task or a different challenge or a different thing, then it's responsibility sits with us to do that. We need to show them that. So it really is an interesting space. I think every school has probably an expectation to fill that void of social learning, which is really fundamentally important. And we need to do that in line with the fact that they're moving into an institutional setting, if you like. It's a school, like there's boundaries, there's rules. So they need to be shown what those rules are within school. And when you're in school, this is what it looks like. If we don't tell them that, it's going to be a real hard experience for the kids to just constantly get in trouble until they find out what all the rules are. So tell them the rules, show them the expectations, and allow them to play and explore each other within those contexts. So yeah, I think the challenge is getting that mix right, but being really clear on when it's time to learn. If it's academic learning and it's procedural or it's declarative, let's embrace the things that the kids need to know, and then give them opportunities to do things with them once they've learnt that.
Yeah.
That's the key. Not just assume that everything needs to be explicitly shown or that everything needs to be innately explored. There needs to be a real be definitive on what we're doing and why we're doing that, and make experiences that are relevant for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think especially now that there is the I guess the challenge, but also the opportunity with artificial intelligence moving into our world, children need to have the knowledge and awareness to discern,
Mm.
um, how to actually utilize the technology.
Mm.
Is that something that you're looking at as a school community as well, and how you approach that type of learning with
Mm.
children as well?
Yeah.
And I guess with families in their understanding of how it's going to impact education, but
Mm.
also how it will impact their social lives and their lives outside of school, and how to actually discern information that's coming at them constantly.
Mm. Yeah, the simple part of my response to that is there's certain things that we, as a primary school, we're a primary school setting, we know are going to help kids really be in a great position to handle AI and any other crazy things that get established over the next 10 to 20 years of their schooling life. And that's that they have a really strong, effective, efficient way of reading, and they can comprehend and they can understand things. And they have a very high functional level of numeracy and awareness of how that plays a role in their life, and the elements of sciences. So, like, we know that a lot of those things, that strong grounding in sort of general knowledge around the world that they live in, and being able to operate within it in terms of understand and comprehend words and sayings, and articulate themselves through written word and through their oral expressive language and those sorts of things, are going to give them the tools that are really helpful for them to negate those circumstances that they find themselves in. As it currently sits, there's loads of challenges that that presents them now. But what does that challenge look like in 10 years' time when they graduate, or 15 years' time, or 20 years' time, or however? We don't know. We didn't see AI coming 10 years ago. So all those kids that went through our school all that time ago, have we failed them by not preparing them for AI? Well, that's probably not the answer that we should be looking for, in my opinion. It should be, what are the things that we can consistently prepare them for that will help them through all challenges. So it's really helps in our imperative is to give them a really strong grounding in those things that we know are always going to be relevant in their life. Like I mentioned, the reading, writing, science, maths, and doing that to a really high quality, so that whatever challenges they find themselves in, wherever it might be, whether that's purely the movement to high school, or whether that's the world of social media that they probably find themselves on now, they've got a level of awareness of the world that they're in, and they're really, hopefully, highly skilled in the way that they can interact with it. Because who knows? Who knows what stuff's going to be thrown out there? I guess as teachers, though, AI wise, we're trying to probably embrace that as a tool that can help with in terms of workload and supporting planning and supporting task design, and we're trying to embrace it for an opportunity. And I suppose indirectly we're passing that on to our students too, because we're embracing it to a certain degree, but with a level of criticism as well, that it's not always as good as it seems. So
Yeah.
there's a critique that's required with anything like that. So I guess when you peel all that back, fundamentally, is AI, can it do the job of a teacher? No, we know it can't. So it can't replace everything. And we need to be able to utilize it and control, if you like, that to benefit us. I suppose that's the probably only point that we make with our students, that we hopefully help them be discerning on whether it's going to be the answer or just a part of the answer for them. But otherwise, we just try and generally embrace the things that we know we can influence, which are giving them really great skills to be able to work that out for themselves.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I suppose it's like any new technology that comes along, you just have to sort of work out whether it really is suitable for your
Mm.
students and your
Yeah.
teachers and then work through it with them.
Yeah.
So just to finish up today, I'm wondering if you can share for, I suppose, new teachers coming into the profession, what do you think is your greatest advice or feelings that you can give them about being a teacher? Like, what is it for you that keeps you motivated and passionate about the profession in your role now, but also as a teacher when you were teaching, and how you moved into leadership, even sort of when you were sort of thinking of quitting teaching? What was it that really brought you back into this space, and what is it now that really excites you about teaching? That's a roundabout question, but
Well, I'll have a swing at
I
it.
think you know what I was trying to
Yeah,
say.
I get what you're saying. I think teaching is absolutely extremely rewarding. It has the opportunity to be very nourishing for, I guess, your moral and those sort of ethical sort of elements of being able to support young people to become better young people, or to learn, or to, there's real genuine plethora of opportunity that exists within that is always going to be motivational. I think the ability to, as starting out as a teacher, you're not going to see this, but the longer you stick at it, and if you've been at it as long as I have, you start to see these kids come full cycle that are then coming, crossing your path in some way as adults, and acknowledging the role that you might have played or help that you might have given, or those sorts of things. That's an extremely rich and rewarding experience that not a lot of people um, experience in their professional life. And I think it is genuinely something that stands out and is a huge motivator for a lot of people. So I think always keeping sight of the fact that you are having an influence, and you may not see it or feel it, but it's happening. So try and keep that in mind, particularly when you're disillusioned. Um, I think the other thing is embracing, really embracing what's known about effective and efficient teaching, and being able to negate some slower paths, because the faster you can improve and maintain positive experiences within your classroom, the more accomplished you feel, and the more accomplished you feel, the more you enjoy the process of teaching and learning. So I just think we use that term all the time, that lifelong learner or open to learning. I think it's just really important that early career teachers just open their eyes to the opportunities that are really clear within our industry, and embrace them, and just commit to the fact that it'll take a little bit of time. But if you can stick at it and establish really good habits and behaviors that are in line with, this evidence, you'll become a really effective and efficient teacher, and that'll feel good. And it does. When really good learning happens, the teacher feels good. And I don't think that there's an experience like that when you feel you've moved 20, 30, however many kids from A to B, whether that be from mid-lesson to mid-term to mid-year, whatever it might be. Those experiences are just, they're worth a lot more than you get paid in teaching, I think. It really can make you feel a sense of pride in what you do, and a sense of achievement that you've had an influence on people that's significant. So I think for new teachers, just keeping mind of that is really important. And I guess the other piece I would say is that no matter how bad the day is, the next, the tomorrow will be a new one. Like the kids will come in, they'll forgotten about whatever happened. You have the opportunity to reset and start again. And how cyclical education is. We have a horrible day, we get tomorrow. We have a horrible year, we get the next year. We can, there's always an opportunity to try again. And I think that too is something very special about what we do, that you get to wash that off. It can be really hard to do, but you do get to wash that off, and get the opportunity to come back another day and try again, which is often, some industries aren't afforded that. You don't get it right, then it doesn't go any further. We get the opportunity to keep turning up and trying again. So, and probably to embrace that, because yeah, it's a tough job, and but a very rewarding one. So
Yeah.
that would be what I'd offer.
Well, thank you very much. I've learned a lot from you today, and I hope that our viewers and listeners also feel inspired by your journey. I think that it sounds like your school is amazing, and that the children are very lucky to have you and the staff there guiding them. And hopefully we inspire some new teachers coming through to just go all in and jump into what is a very rewarding profession. And so thank you for all your work, and keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great to unpack some of those things, and
Hopefully
yeah.
my questions weren't too challenging.
No, it's great. Certainly got a lot of thinking out of that. So I appreciate that, Rachel. Yeah, it's been a nice opportunity just to articulate a little bit of what we do and what's happening here. And yes, I just would echo your comments. We feel our students are very lucky to have the staff we have around them, and we're very proud of what they're doing and how those little kiddos are going. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for the chance to talk about them.
You're welcome. I think it's really important to hear the voices of the people who are actually doing the work, and really making a difference for children. So I appreciate you coming on today, and sharing your experiences.
My pleasure.
Well, what another inspiring interview in our Leadership in Education series of our Creating Connections podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more from other leaders in education, please click on the subscribe button to receive further podcasts on your feed. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, click on the link below to book a meeting with me to learn more about you and your leadership in education. Or if you're listening to this podcast, send an email to rachel@practicallylearning.com.au to express your interest in being on the podcast. If you are a school leader or teacher with aspirations for leadership, but you're challenged with self-doubt, overwhelm, and whether you have what it takes to take that next step, our Connect with Your Mind Mastery Coaching Program can support you to work on your own self-mastery to become the leader you aspire to be. For further information about our coaching and professional learning programs, please visit our website at practicallylearning.com.au or click on one of the links below, and visit our podcast for our future series of interviews to support you as the adults who are guiding children on their learning journey. I do hope you enjoy the rest of our episodes on our Creating Connections podcast, and I hope to meet you soon.